Good afternoon, everyone. Heather with Health Renewed Coaching. And today we are going to talk about relationships. Why? Because our health and our wellness is not just about eating healthy, it's not just about exercise, but it's also about relationships. And that falls in what I call primary foods. So primary foods, one of them being relationships. The next one is career. The next one is physical activity, and the last one is spirituality. Today we're going to focus in on relationships, on how we can strengthen those relationships, what might be missing, what are just some little steps we can take to increase our level of satisfaction. Because when we're not satisfied in a relationship, when we're experiencing poor emotions such as anger, bitterness, frustration, sadness, lonely, all of those things can play into our overall health. Yeah. So today I am meeting with Rosalie Kraft of Daybreak Counseling in Sterling Heights, and she's been a therapist for 15 years in private practice, and she knows all about working with individuals to help increase their level of satisfaction. And it's not just with a spouse relationship or a partner, it can be with a parent or a child. Yeah, absolutely. All kinds of relationships. So Rosalie, what would you say is one of the missing pieces to a more satisfying relationship?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Heather. One of the key components of to a satisfied relationship is what I call self-care or self-love. And the interesting thing about that is we don't think about that automatically because we're thinking about the other person. But self-care involves self-love. If we can't love ourselves, then how are we going to be able to care and love for somebody else? And automatically, like a parental type of love comes to mind for me. Certainly romantic and other relationships that you mentioned. But if we fill our bucket and we're taking care of ourselves with our health, nutrition, exercise, and a big part of the self-care is sleeping, right? Getting our circadian rhythms right. And so many people out there suffer with sleeping problems. But if we fill our own bucket and we're taking care of ourselves, it's actually selfless than selfish. I mean, right? We want to be our best for our loved ones. And I think it's interesting because then that rejuvenates the other person, it rejuvenates ourselves. And, I like to tell my clients that when you take care of yourself, it's a gift not only for yourself, but for others. And it falls right along in with your primary foods that you're talking about for balanced lifestyle and satisfaction. So take care of yourself first so that you can be a reciprocal of that other person and be a giver.
So what might be some tips or ideas for self-care that are that you give your clients? I usually try to stick with things that are free, low cost, or no cost at all, because in little time, and people think, oh, it's got to be this thing. I've got to take a vacation, perhaps, or I've got to go to the spa. It doesn't have to be that big of a thing. Sure, you can do that if that's what's available to you, but what are maybe a couple of little things that someone could choose to do?
The first thing that comes to my mind is, use whatever you have at home. So you can just make better food choices. You don't necessarily have to go on a food plan. Talk to somebody like yourself in, a nutrition program. When I think about exercise, taking walks, doing some deep breathing, right? Taking a time out for yourself, check your attitude in the morning, look at your areas of life, spirituality, health, your mind. And if you take some time, what I call quiet time in the morning to just do some deep breathing, if you're spiritual, do some kind of meditation or relaxation, that is great for self-care. And those are very cost-effective or no cost.
Yeah.
And support. If you have a support group, right, you need to talk to somebody and you're not at the place where you need counseling, you can, call a friend, have your family members. Those are all very easy, quick, natural default self-care.
Absolutely. I know one of my favorite ones that is, I do it every night because I wash my face before bed. And one of my favorite things is to get my washcloth really nice and warm, not too hot,
Yeah.
but and then just kind of hold it over my face and kind of just taking a couple deep breaths. But that moist heat, for me,
Yeah.
it feels amazing.
Yes.
And it's just a couple, 30 seconds, whatever. But just being mindful of little things that you can add into your day where you're taking care of yourself.
Absolutely.
For some people, it could be just sitting down and painting your nails, or like you said, taking that walk. Maybe it's just watching a favorite show for 30 minutes. Whatever it is where you can kind of take care of you, where you're not taking care of someone else for a few minutes, is what's so important. So what might be something, another idea for helping to bring up your level of satisfaction in a relationship?
One of the things I thought of, too, just before I get into that, is the self-care is debriefing, like you were talking, painting nails or watching a show. But, unwinding with something light, laughter, right? They always say laughter is the best medicine. So if you have a job that is very stressful, watch something light, watch a comedy, read some positive quotes. The more we fill ourselves with some positivity and, laughter is good medicine. So that is one thing that I think is also missing in self-care. We don't think about that because we're so structured in to do, and we have to do these grandiose things, and we don't. But the second key factor that I talk to my clients a lot about is communication. And that is really a universal foundation. Communication is so important. There's nonverbal communication and there's verbal communication. And with verbal communication, one of the greatest tips that I think people really need to know and learn is active and reflective listening, right? So really hear that person, that you're talking to. This works very well, more so with romantic relationships. If you're hearing somebody, you're going to listen and then you're going to reflect back. And so if they're saying, oh, I'm really angry and I had a really hard day, that, well, I have too. You don't want to talk about yourself. You want to reflect back. So, for example, if somebody's saying, I have a really bad day, you're going to say, so what I'm hearing is that you had a bad day and you're frustrated. You're going to point on their feelings and then ask them, tell me more about that. Because then that person feels validated and they're going to be open more. And interestingly, studies show that when you're engaged in active and reflective listening, that your perspective broadens and it also calms you down. And so when we look at relationships, instead of getting into he said, she said, it's really great as far as hearing that person. When we look at another piece of communication, when the nonverbal, there's empathy. I think just in general, with people in general, whether it's strangers or coworkers, the art of empathy, unfortunately, I feel, is decreasing. So when you look at empathy, I think it's important to think about touch, right? Just a gentle, like, how are you doing? Right?
It brings that connection.
Absolutely. And, looking into their eyes, and, that goes along with the active and reflective listening. That also shows validation. We are becoming less and less empathetic to people because it's unfortunately becoming more of a self-centered, world, if you will. But I think there's so many things with the empathy that we're missing, and so that connection is really important.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you. Because when, like she said, you feel heard, it helps to bring that stress level down, helps to bring some of that, overwhelm that maybe you were feeling, helps to kind of, let that go off your shoulders. Because when you're feeling stressed, what does your body do? It holds on to everything,
tenses up.
Including maybe the fat or extra weight that you're trying to release from yourself. So by helping to bring some more calm and peace into your life, you can start to maybe see a little bit of that weight shed off of your body because you don't have to hold on to it. Your body doesn't feel like it has to release those stress hormones that are causing you to hold on to that extra weight. So,
and Heather, let me just ask you personally, when you feel that you're being heard or somebody is really paying attention to you, how do you feel with your mind and body? What happens to you in a reactive sort of way?
Mm-hmm. Yes, it is the best feeling, and my guess is most of you have experienced it at some point where someone's like, "Oh, I'm really sorry you're feeling that way, and I can understand that, perhaps those are the ways that you felt or the way you took it, and let's work through that."
Yeah.
It's like your shoulders drop.
Yeah.
You feel a sense of calm and peace, that, okay, this isn't going to turn into an argument. This isn't going to turn into you did this and you shouldn't have done that, and you're bad, or the shame, or anger around it. So it really opens the door for much better communication. It does take some practice, which I'm sure Rosalie would attest to, and that's the beautiful thing is we all make mistakes, and if you're trying, that is getting you somewhere that you weren't yesterday, right? So by a baby step today, another baby step tomorrow, and you'll work your way to where you want to be in how you express yourself in relationships with the people that you love and care about.
Absolutely. And what you're pointing on, Heather, it just really came to my mind, is that style of communication with empathy and active and reflective listening, when somebody feels heard, and the initiator of that conversation is being proactive, and then the person on the receiving end is going to not be so reactive, and it's going to model that proactive communication so that the other person is also proactive. And the defense mechanisms that we hold inside as a default, which sometimes we know and sometimes we don't know, is also going to be reduced. And like you said, open up more open communication, which reduces that stress, which helps with the nutrition, because we're taking care of our bodies and we're going to want to feel better and eat better and sleep better. So as we're talking, I'm seeing, even from your standpoint and the things that you teach, how all this is tying in.
Absolutely. Absolutely. One more tip that we'd like to cover with you is trust. And can you tell us more about trust in a relationship and how that brings up the level of satisfaction?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think trust is one of the hardest key points to really implement in a relationship. And the reason it's so difficult, it hasn't been very clearly defined. I think we all have our own ideas or definitions of what trust is. And I'd like to simplify it today for our audience, Heather. And trust is really about being consistent. Being consistent in your behavior, being consistent in your word. So I tell my clients all the time when they come in, like, oh, I don't know if I trust my partner, I don't know if I trust my kids. And I ask them, well, what type of behaviors are you exhibiting that show consistency to that person, meaning commitment? So be a man or a woman of your word. If you're going to tell somebody you're going to do something, follow up, be consistent. That shows reliability and it shows loyalty, which is right under that trust factor. And one of the ways that you can enact that trust is by being together with them more, finding common interest, showing them that you're interested in what they're doing, and vice versa, right? And that builds trust because you're cultivating, like I said, common interest, you're cultivating rapport. And the more rapport that you have and the more that you're with that person, and going back to self-care, going back to communication, like you said earlier, step by step, they're building. And that's how trust is developed. And I think it's really important. The other thing is, if you think of your relationships, a good example with trust is with family dynamics. So in a family setting, your family is the nucleus, and that is sacred. And when you have that, then all the other things, finances, stress, job, if it's a circle, and you want to have all those outlying factors come from the nucleus going outward instead of inward. And what that does is it creates safe boundaries for families, for groups, for other types of relationships. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah.
So I think that's really important. And so when you think of trust, think of consistency, think of loyalty, and being committed to whatever you're going to put out into the relationship, both as a giver and a receiver.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because I do hear folks say, well, I don't like that, so I don't want to go do that with, my partner or whatever. Say they like big monster trucks or something like that, and that's just not your thing. And perhaps your partner isn't into shopping. So is there some areas that you can compromise? Perhaps they're watching the monster trucks on television. Could you sit with them for 10, 15 minutes, hold their hand, and just spend some time, Because like Rosalie said, touch is so important. So arm around them, holding hands, whatever it takes. But it shows that you're interested and you care enough to spend a little time. Maybe you can ask a question. Hey, honey, who's in the lead? You don't care. It doesn't matter if you don't care, but it shows your partner that you're showing and taking some time to be interested. And then vice versa. Maybe you really like to read or go shopping or whatever it is. And then you can, hopefully that person will say, hey, what are you reading? How's your book going for you? Or maybe they just say, you know what, honey, I got the dishes tonight. Why don't you, take a few minutes by yourself and go enjoy your book? They'll become aware of the things that you enjoy and help you to take that time for yourself. A quick example from my own life. I was supposed to go up to my cottage this weekend to watch a live stream conference, but with the horrible weather that was predicted and that we got, it wasn't the best idea to head up there. So
about not trusting something, right? Not trusting that weather.
Absolutely. So my friend and I talked about it and decided it wasn't the best thing to go. Plus, she's in the middle of a kitchen remodel. And she felt it wasn't the best idea to leave her husband with the 3 kids and go off and have some girl time. So I respected that, and I totally understood. I'm like, you know what? I get it. To try and divide yourself and go, but yet feel guilty that you left your spouse, that can be tough. So I was telling my husband about it, and my husband happens to be a builder, doing new home construction and remodeling, things like that. So he said, would her husband like a hand? Could I come over and give him a hand? And it's very generous of him. I never asked or anything. He offered it on himself because he knew I was looking forward to going away. He knew that was important for me to have that time away. So he said, well, can I go over and help her husband? And then this way, one weekend soon, you guys can get away and have that time. I said, sure, I can offer. And the great thing is that her husband accepted the help. And so we went over Saturday, and he gave a few hours of his time to help get them on the road to getting their kitchen back in order, because it's been a few weeks. So they would love to have their kitchen back. And but that's just, kind of being in tune with your partner.
Absolutely. So. And I like that. And it's interesting as you're telling that story. Stories are very personal, obviously, and personal examples. And as you're saying that to me, it's natural. I mean, right? We're here on Facebook Live, but I can't help but look at you, and I'm right. It's so natural, and I think that's a good point to point out to our audience. And I'm looking at you, and we're making eye contact, and the more you're getting into the story, I'm getting excited with you. Okay, this is cool. And right, so there are natural pieces of relationship that just how we act every day, right? But if we think about those things and we reflect on them, even though they're natural, it does become, a part of cultivating those relationships even stronger. And so I thought that was kind of interesting. I'm like, I'm getting excited and I forget what we're doing, right? So I think increasing your awareness in all of these areas with the self-care, the communication, and the trust. Talk about no cost at all. 5 minutes. Take your quiet time. Think about your relationships. Think about what that person in your life needs. Your child, your spouse, your coworker, your neighbor. Just increase awareness and practice some of these things mentally, so that when, we look at all of those groups that you were talking about in your primary groups and life balance, satisfaction, it's going to become more natural and obviously produce a healthier you, healthier relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you. And that was a great closing, so I don't think I really have to do anything at this point.
Yeah.
So I would like to give Rosalie an opportunity to tell you a little bit about what, your clients and how, you can help individuals.
Oh, well, thank you, Heather. I am a clinical therapist, and I help individual couples and families work through, their mental health issues. I help them give specific plan strategies for daily functioning, relationships, and I'm really looking to help people have a specific plan to increase their overall well-being, right? And I do that with plans and then obviously counseling tips. But my focus is to have a balanced lifestyle, which goes right along in line with Heather. So my approach is with integrating, your mind, body, spirit, health, nutrition to increase your daily functioning. So my strategy is a little bit different than the typical counselor, if you will. And what I mean by that is that most of my clients that come in here know, kind of have a feeling of what's wrong. And what I like to do is say, hey, look, you're at point A and you want to get to point D. My goal is to go B, C, D. Give them that plan with support. And then those B, C, and D points are going to be goals that we work on for movement. Because if you come in my office and we're just, not that feelings aren't important, they are, but if we're just talking about feelings and we don't have a plan, then your time, your money, and your energy is really going to be wasted. And so you could look at, the work that we do at Daybreak really as an investment for your future.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it goes right along with what I do, which is why I was so excited when I met Rosalie and said, wow, we sound very similar. Of course, my focus is a little bit more on health concerns, physically, but we work together so well because she brings in more of the mental side, which is so important, but that's also what I work on with my clients.
Absolutely.
I don't always run to food and nutrition. That's important, absolutely important.
Right.
But if my client is feeling so stressed and their primary foods are really out of balance, that's where I begin. Because when I bring up your primary foods, you are going to be far more successful with trying new foods, with incorporating new habits of exercise, things, regarding food changes so that you are working towards a healthy weight loss. So that when you leave me in 6 months, that hopefully you'll be on the right track for sustainable health and wellness that you have determined for yourself is health and wellness. It's not anything that I prescribe. My clients come into me, that I see them as individuals. I do not have a one-size-fits-all program. When you sit in my chair, you're an individual, and I tailor your plan to you and what's going on in your life, because that's the only way we're going to be successful. Right. So I thank you so much, Rosalie, for taking the time to chat with me and share your expertise with our audience. And I hope that you found this helpful. And please feel free to ask some questions. And we enjoyed speaking with you today. And look us up. Thanks.
And they can go on our websites, right?
Yep, you can check out our websites. I'll pop links below. And we look forward to chatting with you more.
All right. Have a great day, everybody, and thank you for chiming in.
Thanks.
Bye.